I can smell a fraud from a mile away. Olenna Tyrell says this to the High Sparrow in Season 5, Episode 7, standing in the Sept of Baelor, and with those 8 words she cuts through weeks of his carefully constructed performance. An old woman has walked into the holiest place in King's Landing to confront a religious fanatic who holds her grandchildren prisoner. She's outnumbered, outmaneuvered, seemingly powerless. But she's also the Queen of Thorns, the sharpest political mind in Westeros, and she didn't survive decades of deadly politics by being polite to frauds. What follows is a masterclass in political genius, not the kind that wins in this moment, but the kind that gathers intelligence, tests weaknesses, and recognizes when conventional weapons won't work. The High Sparrow has stymied everyone. Cersei thought she could control him. Margaery thought her crown would protect her. Tommen was paralyzed by his weakness. Olenna walked in with no illusions. She saw him clearly from the first moment. And while she couldn't defeat him that day, she learned everything she needed to know. This scene exposed Olenna Tyrell's political genius by revealing how the smartest player in the game operates when facing an opponent who refuses to play by normal rules. The crisis that brings Olenna Tyrell. Let's be clear about what Olenna is walking into. Her grandson Loras has been arrested by the Faith militant. The charge is homosexuality, which the Faith considers a mortal sin, worthy of imprisonment and punishment. Her granddaughter Margaery, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, married to King Tommen, at the absolute pinnacle of power, tried to free him. She demanded his release, confronted the High Sparrow directly, used every ounce of her royal authority. The result? She was arrested too, for lying to protect her brother. The Queen sits in a cell like a common criminal. This is a catastrophe that would break most noble houses. Both heirs to House Tyrell, the family's entire future, are imprisoned by a barefoot zealot who supposedly has no army, no traditional power, except he does have power. The most dangerous kind, true believers willing to die for him, and a king too weak to stand against him. Most people in Olenna's position would be panicking, raging, making desperate moves driven by fear for their family. Olenna walks into the Sept calm, controlled, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Because she's done something crucial before this meeting, she's analyzed the situation. She knows Cersei orchestrated this. Gave the Faith militant their weapons and authority, specifically to target the Tyrells. The woman is drowning in wine and paranoia, but she's still dangerous enough to weaponize religious fanatics. She knows Tommen is useless. The boy king loves Margaery, but doesn't have the spine to defy the Faith. He's been manipulated into paralysis. She knows the small council won't help. They're either complicit or too afraid to act. Which leaves only one option. Go to the source. Talk to the High Sparrow himself. Test whether this crisis can be resolved through negotiation, and if it can't, at least she'll learn exactly what kind of opponent she's dealing with. Cutting through the performance. When Olenna enters the Sept, the High Sparrow is on his knees scrubbing the floor, barefoot, in simple robes, doing menial labor. The picture of humility. This is calculated theater. He wants visitors to see him this way, to be impressed by his piety, to feel worldly and sinful by comparison, to approach him already feeling morally inferior. It's brilliant manipulation. Most know is not the case. Multimary, Hamel, and Bear. They see the barefoot priest and underestimate the political mind beneath the performance. Olenna doesn't even pause. She walks right past his display of humility, doesn't comment on it, doesn't acknowledge it, refuses to play along with the game he's set up. This is the first sign of her genius in this scene. She won't grant him the moral high ground he's trying to claim. She sees the performance for what it is and simply ignores it. The High Sparrow offers her pleasantries. Would she like wine, something to eat? And Olenna delivers the line that defines this entire encounter. I can smell a fraud from a mile away. She's not being subtle. She's telling him directly, I see through you. Your act doesn't work on me. You're performing piety, but I know what you really are. This immediately changes the dynamic of the conversation. Because the High Sparrow's usual strategy, overwhelming people with righteousness, making them defensive about their worldliness, fails completely. Olenna won't defend herself against accusations of sin, won't argue theology, won't let him frame the conversation in terms of godliness versus corruption. She's here to talk about power and consequences, and she's not letting him hide behind piety. The threat, understanding leverage. Olenna doesn't waste time on small talk. She identifies the problem and makes her position clear. The High Sparrow has imprisoned the Queen and the heir to Highgarden. This is a political crisis that threatens the stability of the entire realm. And Olenna controls something the High Sparrow desperately needs: food. House Tyrell rules the Reach, the most fertile land in Westeros. They produce the grain it feeds King's Landing. Without Tyrell's supplies, the capital starves. So Olenna lays it out simply: release my grandchildren, or I withdraw my armies and stop sending food to the city. Let the High Sparrow try to maintain his support among the common people when those people are rioting from hunger. Let's see how righteous they feel when their children are starving. This is brilliant strategy. She's identified the structural weakness in his power base. Yes, the High Sparrow has moral authority. Yes, he has the backing of the faithful. Yes, he's managed to capture the Queen without consequence. But all of that depends on the common people supporting him. And their support depends on being fed. Take away the food, and his entire foundation crumbles. The same people chanting prayers in the Sept will be tearing him apart when they're starving. Olenna is showing him that she understands power, real power, not the illusion of it. She knows what actually keeps a city functioning, and she controls it. This threat should work. It's not emotional or impulsive. It's cold calculation backed by genuine leverage. But the High Sparrow doesn't even flinch. The offer, testing his sincerity. When threats don't work, Olenna immediately shifts tactics. This is another mark of political genius: tactical flexibility. She's not married to one approach. If intimidation fails, she'll try negotiation. She offers him what the faith supposedly wants: resources to help the poor. Gold, food, the wealth of the Reach put toward feeding the hungry and clothing the naked. Everything the faith claims to care about. She's testing him. Is he sincere about caring for the common people? Or is that just rhetoric covering a grab for power? Because if he's genuinely devoted to helping the poor, this should work. She's offering him the means to do enormous good, to feed thousands, to actually fulfill the faith's mission. But if he refuses, it reveals that this isn't really about charity or the God's work. It's about asserting the faith's authority over the nobility, about bringing down the mighty, regardless of the cost. The High Sparrow refuses. And Olenna learns something crucial: he can't be bought. Not with gold, not with the promise of doing good, not with anything she can offer. This is vital intelligence. Most players want something: money, power, security, influence. Once you know what someone wants, you can negotiate. But the High Sparrow genuinely doesn't want anything she has. He's already renounced worldly things. Material offers mean nothing to him. That makes him extremely dangerous. And it means conventional political tools won't work. Calling out the manipulation frustrated, but undeterred, Olenna shifts to direct accusation. She points out what everyone knows but few dare say: Cersei armed the faith. Cersei gave the High Sparrow his power. Cersei orchestrated this entire crisis to destroy the Tyrells. And the High Sparrow is complicit. He's allowing himself to be used as a weapon in someone else's political game. This is Olenna appealing to his principles, saying, you claim to be above politics, but you're drowning in it. You're being manipulated by a woman who cares nothing for the gods or the poor. You're a tool. If the High Sparrow genuinely believes in being above worldly corruption, he should care that he's being used. But again, he doesn't flinch. He acknowledges that Cersei gave him power but claims it doesn't matter. The gods work through imperfect vessels. Cersei's motives don't change the righteousness of his cause. And Olenna realizes, he knows. He knows exactly what Cersei is doing. He knows he's being used. He just doesn't care. Because from his perspective, the end justifies the means. If Cersei's hatred of the Tyrells gives him the power to enforce the gods' law, so be it. This tells Olenna something important. Appeals to his independence won't work either. He's too committed to his mission to care about being manipulated. When everything fails, At this point, Olenna has cycled through her entire playbook. She's tried threats, tried bribes, tried appealing to reason, tried calling out his hypocrisy. Nothing has worked, so she does what Olenna Tyrell always does when conventional methods fail. She gets cutting. She stops pretending to take him seriously. She mocks his performance, makes it clear she sees through every bit of theater. The barefoot humility, costume, the simple robes, props, the pious scrubbing, an act for visitors. "I can smell a fraud from a mile away," she told him at the start. Now she's making sure he knows she meant it. This is Olenna's signature move when she can't win. She at least makes sure her opponent knows she wasn't fooled, that she saw them clearly even if she couldn't defeat them. It's her way of maintaining dignity in defeat. She may not free her grandchildren today, but the High Sparrow will know that his act didn't work on her. And notably, this gets a reaction. Not anger. The High Sparrow is too controlled for that, but acknowledgement. He sees that she's different from the other nobles who grovel before him. The warning disguised as prophecy. The High Sparrow responds to Olenna's mockery with a story. He tells her about his past, about being a cobbler who lived for wealth and pleasure, about waking up after a night of debauchery to find everything empty and meaningless, about his epiphany that worldly things are worthless. And he warns her, "You're like I was, attached to worldly power, blind to spiritual truth, destined for a reckoning." Most people would dismiss this as religious babble, just another fanatic preaching about sin and redemption. But Olenna hears what he's really saying. "I've seen your world from the inside. I know how it works. I played the game you're playing, and I've rejected it completely. You can't bribe me because I don't want wealth. You can't threaten me because I don't fear death. You can't manipulate me because I've already seen through all the tricks. I've renounced everything you use as leverage." This is the moment Olenna fully grasps who she's dealing with. Not a normal political player who wants power or wealth. Not someone who can be reasoned with, or negotiated with, or threatened. But a true believer who has genuinely rejected the entire framework of power she operates within. That makes him more dangerous than anyone she's ever faced, because all her weapons are designed for people who want something. The strategic retreat. Olenna leaves the sept without her grandchildren, without concessions, without winning anything. But she's learned something invaluable. The High Sparrow cannot be beaten with conventional political tools. Threats don't work. Bribes don't work. Appeals to principle don't work. He's outside the normal system, operating on completely different motivations. She doesn't keep throwing herself against an immovable obstacle, doesn't make the situation worse through futile escalation. Instead, she pulls back, regroups, starts thinking about different strategies. Because brilliant strategists recognize when they're using the wrong approach, when the conventional playbook won't work, when they need to find a completely different path. Lesser players would have kept arguing, kept threatening, kept offering larger bribes, kept trying to force a win through the same failed methods. Olenna recognizes that she needs something unconventional, something outside the normal rules, and she starts planning accordingly. What this reveals about her genius. This scene exposed Olenna Tyrell's political genius in ways most viewers completely missed. First, her ability to read people instantly. She sees through the High Sparrow's performance from the first moment, understands its calculated theater, refuses to be impressed or intimidated. Second, her tactical flexibility. She doesn't commit to one approach and stubbornly stick to it. She tries threats, bribes, appeals to principle, mockery. She uses every tool to find what might work. Third, her understanding of structural power. She immediately identifies the High Sparrow's vulnerability. His support depends on the common people being fed. She knows how power actually works, not just how it appears. Fourth, her clarity of vision. She refuses to argue on his terms, won't debate theology or morality, reframes everything in terms of practical consequences and political reality. Fifth, her intelligence gathering. Every failed approach teaches her something. Can't be threatened, can't be bought, knows he's being used, genuinely believes his cause. She's collecting data even in defeat. Sixth, her lack of self-deception. She doesn't pretend she won, doesn't rationalize the failure, doesn't tell herself she made progress when she didn't. She sees clearly, conventional methods failed. The High Sparrow is a different kind of opponent. She needs a different strategy. And seventh, most importantly, her strategic adaptation. This scene sets up what she does later. alliance with Littlefinger, bringing the Tyrell army to King's Landing, preparing to use force where negotiation failed. She didn't just fail and give up. She failed, learned, and adapted. The contrast with others. Compare Olenna's approach to how everyone else dealt with the High Sparrow. Cersei empowered him, thinking she could control him. Thought she'd give him weapons to use against her enemies, then take those weapons back when convenient. She fundamentally misunderstood him. Treated him like every other player. Someone who could be manipulated, controlled, discarded. The result? He imprisoned her too. Put the Queen Mother herself in a cell, and made her walk naked through the streets. Margaery tried to use her position as queen, thought her crown would protect her, that she could demand Loras's release, and the faith would back down. She didn't understand that the High Sparrow doesn't respect worldly authority. Being queen means nothing to someone who only recognizes the god's authority. Tommen was paralyzed, torn between his love for Margaery and his fear of defying the faith. He made no real moves at all, but Olenna understood the High Sparrow better than any of them. She saw him clearly, recognized he was genuinely different from normal political players, understood that conventional tools wouldn't work. And while that understanding didn't let her win in this moment, it positioned her to eventually find solutions others couldn't see. The tragedy of being right. There's a profound irony in this scene. Olenna is right about everything. She's right that the High Sparrow is being used by Cersei. She's right that imprisoning the Queen destabilizes the realm. She's right that the common people's support depends on being fed. She's right that this will end badly for everyone involved. But being right doesn't matter when your opponent doesn't care about the same things you do. The High Sparrow isn't concerned with political stability. The final truth. This scene exposed Olenna Tyrell's political genius, not through victory, but through how she handles defeat. She reads her opponent perfectly, cuts through performance and pretense, identifies vulnerabilities, uses every tool in her arsenal. She threatens when threats might work, bribes when bribes might work, appeals to principle when that might work. And when nothing works, when she's tried everything and failed, she recognizes it clearly and adapts. This is what political genius actually looks like. Not always winning, but always learning. Not being attached to one approach but flexibly trying everything. Not self-deceiving about failure, but clearly seeing what the failure teaches. The High Sparrow is formidable precisely because he doesn't play by normal rules. He can't be bribed, threatened, or manipulated using conventional methods. But Olenna doesn't leave that meeting defeated in the way that matters. She leaves it informed. She knows exactly who she's dealing with, understands his motivations, his imperviousness to normal leverage, his genuine conviction, and that knowledge, that clear-eyed understanding of her opponent, becomes the foundation for finding a different solution. Not the solution she wanted, not a clean political victory, but a different path that addresses reality rather than wishes. This is the mark of true political genius, seeing reality clearly even when it's inconvenient, being flexible enough to abandon failed approaches, being intelligent enough to gather useful information even from unsuccessful negotiations. Olenna Tyrell walked into the Sept of Baelor as the Queen of Thorns, sharp, cutting, brilliant. She walked out having failed to free her grandchildren, but she also walked out with something more valuable. Perfect understanding of an opponent who had stumped everyone else. And in the Game of Thrones, understanding is power. Even when it can't save you immediately, it's the foundation of every victory that comes later. Olenna knew she'd lost this battle, but she also knew, with absolute clarity, why she lost and what she'd need to do differently next time. That's genius. Not being unbeatable, but being undeceivable. She saw the High Sparrow exactly as he was, and she adjusted her strategy accordingly. In a world of players who lie to themselves about their failures, Olenna's greatest strength was brutal honesty about what worked and what didn't. She could smell a fraud from a mile away, including the fraud of pretending you've won when you've lost. That honesty, that refusal to deceive herself, is what made her the most dangerous political mind in Westeros. And this scene proved it. Although he was born an intimate briefer, he resolved and showed the fear.